Throughout your career, you've interviewed many different people, from, I guess, criminals to priests to emos to, a diverse range of people. Do you think it's necessary to emotionally separate yourself from the people you interview?
Depends what my aim is. I guess because I'm a bit of a trickster and lots of my work has different purposes. Sometimes I'm trying to really connect them and humanise people. So in my true crime book, I was really trying to do that. And generally I do kind of just naturally connect with people. But then if I was doing something more mischievous, like a prank where I went to the Ku Klux Klan and tried to, convince the guy to let me join even though I'm Jewish. Like with him, it's like the opposite. It's like I'm likely to emotionally connect with him and I just have to say, no, I'm here to get a prank done and I'm double crossing him and therefore I'll force myself to emotionally disconnect.
But in that, you often actually manage to quite well integrate yourself into these people.
Usually the way I get into things, like people open up to me, is that I'm generally sincerely interested in all these mystical things and they kind of pick up on that. So that they're kind of excited that there's a person that's not them, that's an outsider, that is interested in exorcisms or whatever, or voodoo.
There's a sort of distance that you do create in a way so you don't get enveloped with those certain communities, that way you have an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think that's then easier for the audience that you hope to portray these people to? Do you think it makes it easier for them to digest because it's not sort of a first-hand experience?
You're right. They are saying that, oh, well, John's me, sort of. Not quite the everyman, but there's an element of me. And I think obviously using humour or cheekiness it makes it more digestible to a lot of people.
What's your intent when you interview people?
I'm often really interested in the funny humanness of people, regardless of how extreme they are in their political views. So I'm sort of engaging with them on some other level. I can't even really justify it. And it's also real. And I think it just shows another side to people. And it just shows that not all of the world is, politics. There's different dimensions to things. My impulse is always, how do I defy expectations by showing that this person's kind of not human, but warm and interesting, and I like to present the weird complications.
Do you think you're interweaving a sort of National Geographic or Australian story aspect to it, or is it pure entertainment?
I think it's both, and I also don't. I think truths get drawn out through humour and also through entertainment. Yeah, but I always find that weird. I get kind of a bit annoyed by it, that thing that people think that if you present something earnestly, it's more moral than if you present a story cheekily. And I drew out something that's not usually drawn out. But you can't win, because the earnest people always win. Often their stories are boring or something, but they win in that, they can say, oh, listen, but the point of my story is that I was taking a stand and here's these statistics, and and they can just, people like that will always be able to attack me. But I back me.
You produce a sort of realm in which people can feel comfortable with you in your own way. Do you feel unique in that way?
No, I'm kind of like that. All these kind of flaws or interesting things that these people have, that's me too. Humans are weird, and I'm one of the humans that is weird.
Well, in many of your series, you've done a lot of interesting sort of feature work. So you conducted a voodoo curse on your ex-girlfriend.
Yes.
You actually went into Disneyland and you wrote the facts of what Walt Disney actually did and how he supported Hitler.
Yeah.
And lots more, actually. A person in Mississippi, in Birmingham, Mississippi, who was in jail.
Yeah.
He had an illegal mobile
phone?
He
had a contraband cell phone.
Yeah. Where do you define sort of what's moral and immoral in your role as a journalist?
I did notice in true crime writing it is hard because you can't win. You're either paying a criminal, and it's like, how can you do that, you arsehole, and he's killed people, or you've paid him too little and you're an outsider exploiting him. The other thing about the outsider, which is what you were talking about before, is there's all these assumptions made that you're just meant to go along with, and one of them is that or if you're an outsider, you don't have authority to talk about things that are out. And I just don't agree with that. I think it's like a complicated ecosystem of things, the creative world. And so some people should be insiders who are writing about being an insider. But outsiders are really important. And being a writer, you're just an outsider. I think it's unsustainable, this thing of, well, there's only certain people who are, for some reason, tick exactly all the boxes, so they're the ones who are allowed to talk about something.
Is there some stories that are too sort of dangerous for you to cover, or where do you draw the line in which you actually won't cover a story?
Generally, I'm kind of like attracted to things that I'm not meant to go there. In Australia, in my experience at ABC and SBS, they'll let me do anything pretty much, except they kind of really freak out if I bring up anything to do with Aboriginality. Compared with, like, they're fine with me going blackface in Chicago. Often in my shows, if it's something and I've ended up and it's something African, that actually started off as being something I wanted to do with Aboriginal, and it's like, no, don't go there. And they freak out. And I think that white outsiders just being antsy and paranoid is just sort of not doing justice to something that's really fascinating. I just think, screw it. Like, there should be an Aboriginal Australian who's talking about this awkward thing. And so, maybe that's my societal function.
Have you ever had to draw a line, though, personally?
I mean, there are things where you go, that person deserves it. So just say Ray Martin, when I double-crossed him. On the one hand, I back it satirically. Like, I go, he deserved it because his show just turned up on people's doorsteps, and so he deserves it. What I'm saying is that when I was Ray Martin, I kind of felt just shitty about double-crossing. So usually I feel bad about double-crossing people. I just really hope that once I package it together and they see the end result, usually people can be good-humoured about it. Like I throw myself in it and try to look like an idiot myself. And also the other thing I've kind of discovered is that the sky usually doesn't fall in.
Is there anything that draws you to these people, or?
Yeah, well, depending on what you're trying to find out, most people have an interesting story. It's how you draw that out of them.
How would you cope if the role of someone went into your life and, did a role reversal?
Yeah.
I mean, how would you cope?
Oh, you definitely don't like it. Like, I can definitely relate to why people get really upset. People can even be writing like a good story about you, like when they're not out to get you, and you're still like, you get really antsy. But having said that, I usually get over it. Like, I don't carry it around for days or anything. I know this sounds weird, but I kind of only like revealing myself in so much as I think it's helpful for the stories.
Do you bring your own life experiences into your interviewing styles?
I learned this whilst doing Murder in Mississippi, was if you want someone to talk, what you do is you find out something that someone else has said, either about that person or about something they have an opinion on. So you're not there going, so what do you think of this? Or what do you think about racism? Or who do you think murdered the thing or whatever? Usually not just, it is said. You try to make it kind of like somehow personal a bit, yeah.
Do you believe the role of a journalist in media is changing? I mean, before the internet, there was there was newspapers.
Yeah.
And now that the internet's come in, it's sort of iPads and
Yeah.
no real newspapers. It's a Twitter feed mainly.
Yeah.
Can you discuss that further?
Yeah, sure. I reckon there's a lot of self-flattery amongst people who sit on their computers and tweet. I reckon you have to do a lot of hard yards and a lot of effort and a lot of work to, do a lot of stories, and most people just aren't willing to do that. With citizen journalism is like, find me one tweeter in Australia who does a beat of the courts. It's just bullshit that there's all these self-motivated people who are doing it. Like everyone starts talking about some issue and it's like, oh, we're all tweeting about it, so therefore this is generated on Twitter. It's like, no, that story generated because Rupert Murdoch paid a journalist, and that journalist was at the courts and reporting on the case, and then they wrote a story that went online on one of Rupert Murdoch's websites. Then you all linked and looked at that story, and now you're all discussing that story. But You weren't there in the court. It was like you've forgotten that someone was actually a regular old school journalist did the initial things.
How do you go into places without a bias, or do you go into places without a bias, or?
I don't know if I don't have a bias. So, well, I guess in the case of those clan things, I'm always trying to do something ironic, but I guess which is trying to say something bigger. So usually with those white supremacists, it's all about how they've got this strict rule of who is who. So it's like, that person's white, that person's black. And then I go in there and kind of screw things up by bringing up like these other weird examples. Like, well, if you don't like, if you're saying Jews can't join the clan, but you know how with Judaism, if you've got a Jewish father, you're not really a Jew. You have to have a Jewish mother. So if you've got a Jewish father, can you join the clan? And then, and then you know, getting a bit flustered.
No, I think people are always like stopping me, but it just makes it kind of more interesting. I realised later that that's sort of part of the story, part of life is that people are going to have secrets from you and you have to kind of weave around that. And often once it's like the Wizard of Oz where you finally see the Great Oz and he's not that great. So yeah, I'm really open to being denied access. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it is very much like the Wizard of Oz. It's a very good example. Do you think you show your side? Like, do you believe you're open when you interview?
No, I have secrets. And definitely things that are like irrelevant. No, I don't. I sort of do throw myself in some ways, in ways that I think are like interesting or entertaining. But no, I'm gutless in my own ways.
When does a dangerous idea become dangerous? I was wondering if you could discuss that a bit more.
The other thing I've discovered is people always assume that when it comes to an issue, there's one side of the issue that's dangerous or the other, when sometimes both sides aren't dangerous. So I'm thinking of things like having a position on asylum seekers or boat people is like, yeah, it's real high stakes for the people who do that, who are on the boats. But actually, if you're just like an Aussie and you have a position, I just don't think it's that dangerous to either be pro the boat people or anti it. Like, you're going to be fine.
Would you describe yourself as endearing in a sort of aspect of curiosity when you interview people, which makes people like you more?
I think it's more the opposite, that I don't understand how curious I am. When I watched this Julia Zamiro thing, she followed me around for a day. I had no idea I come across like that, which sounds really weird. And I was like, I see, I come across a bit more sort of Aspergery and whatever the word is. And I had no idea I was like that. But yeah, no, I would say it is true. Like, people pick up on the energy that I'm really curious about things. But it's not like a tactic. I reckon I have other tactics. I have other kind of manipulative tactics where it's like, if I do this, I'll get that. And so I definitely do that. But I think on the issue of curiosity, I just don't. I think it's true what you're saying, but it's innate. Yes.
Well, what's next?
Well, I'm doing another draft of the book for America. It's getting released by an American publisher. I'm going to be doing a shorter true crime thing for a magazine, like where I'm going to go somewhere for probably a week and then investigate this murder. But that's like for an extended piece for a magazine.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Thank you.